And I couldn't have done anything more in that race. My friends on the team took me out that night into downtown Seoul. It was the last race for us. We went to a couple of bars, and they took a beer can and they broke, they bent the beer can, and then they broke it, the aluminum beer can. They took all the aluminum off until all that was left was the disc at the top of the can with the hole that you drink through. And they put a string through it. And they put me up on a chair in the bar, and they made a big deal of it. And they gave me an aluminum medal for coming fourth. And I still have it. So I was disappointed, but also, proud of that performance. Like, it was the best I could possibly do. And the next year we raced at the World Championships, and these were in Plovdiv, Bulgaria. And I felt like I had something to prove because I hadn't been able to get on the podium the year before. And so that's me in lane 6. I'm coming second in the 1,000-meter C1 final there, which was a little bit of indication for me because I felt like, I could have got on the podium last year if things had gone well. Oh, and I should mention also that in that race in Seoul, in the final, the Soviet guy who won, he did a time of 4:12 in a headwind, which was very comparable to the headwind that I'd raced at in Dartmouth at our national championships. So I'm pretty confident, had things gone differently in the training, if we'd approached it differently, I can't say that I would have won. You can never say that, but I'm pretty confident that I would have been better. And given how close it was to third place, that I think I could have stood in the podium. But anyway, water under the bridge. I went back to the Olympics in 1992, and I actually ended up racing doubles. That year I won the selection in both distances of C1, 500 meter and 1,000 meter, and both distances of C2. And the team coaches thought it would be we could get a better team result if the guy who came second in the C1s raced at the Olympics and we raced the C2s. So I went along with that. And my partner Dave here and I, we were a good C2. Like, the next year we were fourth at the World Championships. All through this season we did really well at the World Cups, but at the Olympics we fought. And I don't mean that we were like mad at each other or that we were, get out of the boat on the dock and throw punches at each other. We just fought in the boat. And to be good in a crew boat, in canoeing or kayaking, your paddles have to work perfectly in sync, not just hitting the water at the same time, but actually pulling through the water at the same time with the same amount of force on the stroke throughout the entire stroke, exit together, and then enter and do the same thing again and again and again and again. And we were slightly off in terms of how our paddles were working in the water. I can't explain why, but we didn't paddle well there. And this was really disappointing. Remember, I told you about fourth place was disappointing, but it was better than fifth. At this point, I would have given anything to have come fourth in that race. So it was a big disappointment. As it turns out, this would be my last Olympics. I tried to go back to the Olympics in '96, which would have been in Atlanta. And unfortunately, I came second at the selection, like I'd done way back in 1980. And all second does is get you a handshake. And, well, good job, man, and a handshake. It doesn't get you a ticket to the Olympics. And I was beaten by a guy from our canoe club here that had, much like I'd watched John Wood win a silver medal in 1976, he watched me win in '84. And he had the best race that he'd ever had at the precise moment he needed to have it at the selections. And he won the 1,000 meter C1 and went to the Olympics, and I stayed home. So that was disappointing. But again, at that point I was 33 and had had a fantastic career. So, disappointing, not the way I wanted to finish it, but certainly not the end of the world. So what do you do when you retire as an athlete? Well, the first thing you got to do is you got to get a job. Because to this point, if you're an athlete, you're really, to train full-time, you can't work full-time. So you're doing a collection of part-time things, working at a structural steel shop, coaching a little bit at the canoe club, supply teaching, bits and pieces of odd jobs just to try to make ends meet. And then you're also getting some assistance from the team. So what I did is I got a full-time job teaching school at St. Mildred's Lightborn School here in Oakville. Never would have thought that I'd end up teaching phys ed at an all-girls private school, but that's the way it worked out. And I coached the canoe club, and I did a lot of paddling just up and down the river because I love being on the water. The other thing I should tell you is that back when I was 14 years old, the year after John had won his silver medal, and had already decided that that's what I wanted to do. My father went to work one day and he didn't come home. He had a heart attack at work. It died on his desk. And I decided at that point, like, he made a lot of mistakes in terms of his health. And I decided at that point that I wasn't just training to be fast in my canoe, I was actually training to live. And so this was part of it. After I'd retired from the national team, since I loved being on the water and I knew it was healthy, I just kept paddling. I didn't train as hard as I had trained before, but I'd go out and paddle every day because I loved doing it. And then I also got into coaching at the club. And so these are some of the kids that I coach. These are all girls, actually, in these slides. Interesting thing about this is that when I raced at the Olympics, women did not race canoe. They raced kayak events, but they did not race canoe. It's only in Tokyo a couple of years ago that women raced canoe for the first time. And yet they've been paddling canoe in Canada since I retired from the national team in 1996. So I really enjoy coaching at the canoe club. I'm still coaching girls C4s, which is the boat you see on the right. I got a crew that's on the water tonight that I'll be with, and we have had a lot of success, and so I really enjoy that. So I've done a lot of coaching. And then I also got into these other forms of paddling. So this is an outrigger race. This is in the channel between Molokai and Oahu, two Hawaiian islands. And this is a 6-man outrigger, like Polynesian canoe. I think I am in number 3 in that boat, 3rd from the front. And I also did a single version, a 1-man version of this race. And it's about 40 miles. The single race takes about 4.5 hours, and it's intense. Waves are, when you're sitting down in one of these boats and you look over your shoulder, the waves are the height of the ceiling. And that's just the wind wave. There's this ground swell underneath that. And so you actually, when you look over your shoulder, you see the first wave. And then further back in the swell, you see even higher than that, the second wave and the third wave. It's like, and the water's this dark, dark blue. And it's like paddling on a moving dark blue ski hill. It's really intense, but fun. And then I also got into dragon boat. And this is the only picture I could find of this. I took this off a YouTube video. This is in Hong Kong, actually, in 1996, where a bunch of us from, interesting, like Dave, my C2 partner, he didn't make the Olympic team either, so he's in this crew. And there's a bunch of guys from either recently retired national team paddlers, or there's a couple of guys in this boat who became national team paddlers and had really good international careers. 20 of us got together. We went to Hong Kong to race this big dragon boat race, and we were the first crew from outside of Asia to ever have won this event. And we've just crossed the finish line. We've narrowly beaten the Chinese in lane 4 and the Indonesians in lane 5. And that's me, I think. I was one of the first guys to stand up and celebrate. So that was a really fun moment. And we ended up traveling all around the world until 2004, racing dragon boat, a bunch of guys that I paddled with here. Can you imagine how much fun it is, when you've been an athlete in a single event or maybe a double event, how much fun it is to suddenly be part of a team where there's 20 guys and traveling around the world. And, these are some of your best friends and real characters racing in, different locations and racing people. A lot of people that I'd raced against in canoe earlier were doing the same thing in other countries. And we had a great time. We did really well. And it was really nice to have this kind of outlet where you could still compete and you could do it with your friends, and you could still travel. So that was a lot of fun. And then I got into this thing called SUP, stand-up paddling. And this has been the best thing that has ever happened to me. Like, I'm serious, like as good as wandering down to the canoe club in the first place, because it's extended meaningful paddling right up to the present day for me. All I was doing when I was paddling canoe was I was enjoying my time in the water. But can you imagine when you've been to the highest level and you're going out and paddling every day and you're getting slower and slower and slower? Like really all I was doing was, it was like an interesting study in charting my decline, and I just thought I need something that's different, that's new, where I can sort of start from scratch and I can have goals and I can have, new things to learn that can make me better. And this came along. And this sport didn't really exist until 2008. I started in 2010. And it's essentially canoe paddling, just like I was doing, but standing up. And the difference is too, I have to do it instead of only on the right side, I have to do it on the left side as well. So I had to teach my body to do everything that I could do naturally on the right side. I had to teach myself to mirror it on the left, which is quite a challenge. And then I also had to do it in rougher water, because these are essentially surfboards, and a lot of the racing is in the ocean in conditions like you saw in that slide of the outrigger. This was great. It gave me new skills to learn, new meaningful paddling to do, new racing opportunities. And then I was doing all of that while I was teaching. And so my summers would be full of time spent at the canoe club, paddling as much as I possibly could. And then, in the winter when I was teaching, I paddled, a little bit in the winter on the weekends, but mostly, when you're at school at 7:30 and you're leaving the school at 5, there's not a lot of time left to do anything other than maybe go to the gym. In 2014, I had an opportunity, and it was to coach with the national team. And I was specifically asked by these two guys. That's Adam Van Couverden, who's on the left. I'm sure you've heard of him. And that's his Mark Oldershaw on the right. I don't know whether you've heard of Mark, but both these two were Olympic medalists in London in 2012. They both approached me and asked me, they said, the national team could really use somebody with your knowledge and experience. And so they set up a meeting with the national team. And the next thing you know, I had this opportunity to a 2-year contract to work with the team through until the Olympics in Rio in 2016. So I went to my school. I talked to the head of the school, and I said, I've got this amazing opportunity. Is there any way we could work it so I could get like a 2-year leave and come back to my job after? And they declined the notion of a 2-year leave, so I quit. And I wish in a way that I could have stayed, because I would have been eligible for a full pension instead of, like a partial pension. But the 2 years I spent with the team were fantastic. And not having a teaching job to go back to afterward made me have to rethink my career. And so I started my own business, and we call it Paddle Monster. And it's basically paddle coaching, mostly in stand-up paddling. And I do most of it online, by Zoom, we have a website. Everyone works with me through a website interface. I create a ton of content, videos and written stuff about paddling training, technique, all of that kind of stuff. I've got paddlers from all over the world. I've got some of the top pros that I work with, world champions, and I've got local people who, I paddle up and down the river with, and who are, just really beginners. So people of all levels. It's paying my bills. I have a lifestyle that financially that's comparable to what I had as a teacher at the top of the grid, the pay grid, but my quality of life has improved tremendously, because I don't have to go to a job straight away. I wake up in the morning, and the first thing I do is, for me, I get out on the water. And I can't tell you how many mornings I've had like this on the water, where you can see the sunrise, and I'm out there with other people. I paddle with a group of guys that are retired. I'm 60. And the oldest in our group is 70. And there's a few younger guys that are, have shift jobs or they've retired early, but we get out every morning. We go all winter. We suit up in dry suits, so we get out all winter. And so we see each other just about every morning, all through COVID, when everyone couldn't see other people because of social distancing. We got together because you can't be more socially distant than being on the water. And we went out and got our exercise, and we got the type of, social contact that people weren't getting during the pandemic. It's just, it's fantastic. So I get out there every day. Just over here, we launch at the boat ramp usually. In the winter, the river's frozen. We launch at wherever we can along the lakeshore, often Coronation Park. But we'll go to our work. We're usually out there for about 80 minutes, like I was this morning. And then we get off the water, we walk across the bridge, go into town, grab a coffee, walk back, talk about whatever. And then we all get in our cars and go home and go on about our day. And for me, that's going to work and sitting in front of a computer and working with, the clients that I have, or creating new content or whatever. So, but the amazing thing is I'm in better shape now at 60 than I was when I was teaching school, because I get out on the water every day, and the quality of life that I have is better. I don't want to make it sound like teaching's a bad job. It's not. You got your summers off, so like I'm living summers off 12 months a year now, and then obviously finding time to get my work done, and I enjoy my work because it's when I was teaching, I wasn't teaching what I'm really an expert at, and now I am when I'm doing my coaching job. I also learned to surf, paddle surf, where you have a paddle in your hand. Where do you think this is? Good guess. It's Lake Ontario. These are home waters. Do you guys know where Park Avenue and Howard Avenue are in Southeast Oakville? Sure. So at the foot of Park and Howard, there is a shelf that runs out into the lake about 1 kilometer. And so the depth of the water about 1 kilometer offshore is less than the height of this room. And so if you have a keel boat, don't get in too close to shore there. But when there's a big east wind, it kicks up big waves. And on this particular day, this is in February, I want to say 2018, there had been a nuking east wind and giant waves all overnight or for a couple of days. And then the wind just stopped, and you had these massive waves rolling in. And so we went out, and so the picture in the top left, I'm paddling, and you can see the wave is jacking up behind me, and I'm going to surf it into shore. The second picture is actually offshore, and I'm paddling. I'm actually riding. I'm riding this wave, and I'm sort of staying in between the valley between the two waves. That's the back of the wave in front of me. Wow. And then the other two pictures is, when you surf into shore, you got to get back out again to catch the next wave. And so, if you're doing prone surfing where you don't have a paddle in your hand, you got to hand paddle out and duck dive under the waves. But with a paddle in your hand, you can actually paddle out. And it really only gets tricky when a wave is breaking at you and you got to get over it. And so the next two pictures are getting over that wave. And I did not fall on this. I got over the wave. I'm going, my board, is pointed up in the air in the first picture. And then as I got over the top of the wave, it's going way downhill. And so my paddle slapped in the water to keep me on the board. But these are things that I never had a chance to do. I never would have had a chance to do if I hadn't taken that, career change step. So certainly no regrets about that. And here we are, it's 2023. I'm still doing what I love doing, which is paddling. This was last weekend. This was in Georgian Bay. This is in Collingwood at a race. And I'm actually preparing to go to the World Championships in Pattaya, Thailand in November. I'm going to race the old guys event, 15 over. That's, I have a goal. And I think it's, it's amazing at 60 to still have, a sport goal. So that's kind of my story. That's what's brought me here to you guys today. And I know that Tim mentioned that you had an interest in hearing about the athlete's perspective on politics and international sport. So let's shift gears. I've just given you my resume, and now I'm going to tell you about what I think about these various topics. And you guys please ask questions, okay? Because by no means can I talk extemporaneously about these things for a long period of time. The first area is cheating and doping. So let's get straight to it. In '88, when I came fourth, I lost to an East German who came second. In 1989, I'm sure you remember that just like I do. I walked in on, I think it was November 9th. I walked into my house and grabbed a bite to eat, sat down in front of the television, turned on the news, and there was people standing on top of the Berlin Wall. And it was amazing. And shortly after, the DDR, East Germany, didn't exist anymore. And the Stasi, the secret police in East Germany, desperately tried to burn all their files because they were real bad actors. They were apparently the biggest state intelligence service ever, bigger than the KGB, bigger than even the Gestapo. And they tried to burn all the files, destroy all the files, but they didn't get through that because there's so many files. And one of the files that people found when they started going through them after were all the files about how they had doped their athletes. So think about East Germany, a country that was 17 million people, small country, and a country that had to build a wall around the city of Berlin and along its border with West Germany to keep people in the country because they were bleeding population like crazy until 1961 when the wall went up. And they were seen as, rightly so, by the rest of the world as this, this communist dump. And I was there a number of times. I can tell you that that's the truth. But in terms of propaganda, it was really great if they could show the world that, oh, we're this, socialist workers' paradise. And look at our athletes. They're the best in the world. And so they made it a priority to participate at the Olympics and try to win everything. And as a method of doing that, they doped their athletes systematically, systemically, like everybody got doped. The athletes were, told, here, take these pills. And if athletes refused to take them, they weren't on the team. And so I don't know whether it was late '89 or 1990, but Der Spiegel, a German magazine, produced a list of all these German athletes whose files they found amongst think about it. This is how important it was for the East Germans. That the doping information was held by the secret police. Like it was a state secret. It wasn't just like a bunch of athletes went out on rogue and took steroids, like when Ben Johnson did in Canada. This is what we do as a system because our athletes are going to win no matter what. And so they had a list of names, and Georg Schmidt, the guy that won the silver medal when I came fourth, his name was on it. He passed away a couple of years ago, and I don't know whether that was just bad luck or whether that had something to do with the fact that he was loaded up with steroids when I was competing against him. But, since then, when it's turned out that athletes have competed against somebody who's cheated and the cheater's gotten caught, they've had the medal taken away and the medals have been reassigned. Now, I don't care that I had the aluminum medal instead of a bronze. It happened so long ago that I don't waste a moment of my life thinking about it. I'm proud of the aluminum medal, but I do find it interesting that I was impacted by that. The other thing that happened is more recent. We've seen a resurgence in doping with Russia, and Russia was actually after the Sochi Olympics or before the Sochi Olympics, they were a lot of their athletes were testing positive, and so now we have the WADA, the World Anti-Doping. What is it? World Anti-Doping Association, yeah. Their job is to, to sort of monitor doping and combat it. And they suggested to the IOC that the Russia be banned from the Olympics because so many of their athletes were cheating. There's a really great Netflix documentary called Icarus on what's going on was going on with Russian doping. And yeah, actually, if you wanted to see anything on what was going on in East Germany, there was a series that used to be aired on PBS. It's called Secrets of the Dead. And one of their episodes was called Doping for Gold. And you can find it on YouTube. And it's an hour-long discussion of what East Germany was doing to their athletes. So Russia was supposed to be banned, but the IOC, as usual, decided that they would not ban them totally, that they could compete, but they couldn't compete as Russia. They had to compete as a Russian Olympic Committee. Now I ask you, do you see a difference if somebody's competing as Russia or the Russian Olympic Committee? Like, we all know they're Russia. The only thing that they didn't get to do was see their flag go up the pole if they stood in the podium or hear their anthem. And that was the limit of the sanctions that they had. Now, if there was an athlete that had tested positive and was still, it's suspended, obviously they couldn't participate. But there was a lot of athletes that were highly suspected of being, part of that again, systemic approach to doping that were able to compete. They just competed as the Russian Olympic Committee rather than Russia. All of these topics kind of fit together. Like when you start looking at it, like sport is a political tool. I mentioned to you, like in 1980, how Canadians boycotted the Olympics in Moscow, largely due to the persuasion of the Americans, Jimmy Carter. And that made quite a statement. In fact, it made such a statement that when 1984 came around, the Russians decided they were going to boycott the games in Los Angeles. And they leaned heavy on a bunch of their East Bloc satellite states, and a number of them boycotted as well. When Canada did that, it was part of a comprehensive package of sanctions and boycotts against Russia or the Soviet Union. Grain exports were curtailed. Other economic exports and trade things were curtailed. I can still remember the day of the opening ceremonies in Moscow in 1980. I was at a regatta on Center Island, and we heard on the news driving in that the Canadian government had decided that they would lift the grain embargo they had imposed on the Soviet Union as a penalty for their invasion of Afghanistan. So the farmers, they still got the trade. And I think that's good because, farmers need to make a living. But athletes were the only ones that paid the price that year with our boycott. So athletes have been used as political tools since the beginning since 1936, when the Olympics were in Berlin and the Nazis put on a big propaganda show. These German athletes were used as propaganda tools because every time they stood on a podium, it reflected glory on the German Democratic Republic. I ask you, like, if athletes are used as political tools, then why shouldn't athletes be able to use their platform as athletes to make political statements? So you may recall, not that long ago, within the last year, LeBron James, we all know who LeBron James is, right? He spoke up about something, and I can't remember what the issue was, quite honestly. But he spoke up about something, and one of the the Fox News type pundits told him that he should shut up and dribble. And he's an athlete. Who cares what his opinion is? He's not entitled to an opinion because he's an athlete. And I would take the position that if we're being used as political tools by governments or by, even we were used by, I'll get to this in a second, but we're all athletes who go to the Olympics are all used for for commercial purposes and not remunerated for it. If that's the case, why shouldn't an athlete speak up and have an opinion? And so recently, I joined a group of Canadian athletes and spoke up about something that we all thought was very important. You recall that in February last year, Russia invaded Ukraine, right? And last year, international sport federations were pretty adamant that Russian athletes, as a result of this invasion, should lose their right to participate in international sport. Well, this year, with the Paris Olympics in 2024 approaching, the International Olympic Committee, and with all of their backbone, is deciding that, well, it's probably a good idea if we actually let Russian athletes participate. It's not really fair to those Russian athletes. And they're getting a lot of pressure from a particular guy who resides in the Kremlin to do that. And so, believe it or not, the Canadian Olympic Committee, our Olympic Federation, said that, well, we wouldn't be disagreeable to finding a way for Russian athletes to participate in Paris. And so I saw that on social media and I commented on it. And to the effect that, that would be the most disastrous thing that we could ever do to support their participation. And a number of other athletes saw my post and they felt the same way. And a group of us got together and we signed an open letter to the COC saying that we disagreed strongly with any effort to allow Russian athletes to participate in 2024. And we sent that to the IOC as well. And shortly after, I spent an entire Friday afternoon doing repeated radio hits on CBC radio to that effect. Just as an aside, I wonder why CBC radio doesn't do like one interview and then just send it to all the different, affiliates across the country. But no, they each had to do their own interview. So I did it like 15 times that afternoon. And I'm sure we spent a lot of money paying all these different hosts to ask the same questions. But anyway, that's an aside. And as a result, this is what was thrown at me, and I'm really proud of it. I'm as proud of this as I am of anything that I've actually done as an athlete. You can read it for yourself. It's comical with the language that's used, but this is an example of politics and sport. And yeah, Russophobia. And so my particular favorite is the last line. This measure is also aimed at encouraging these persons to rethink their behavior. But I ask you, like I'm proud of this, and quite frankly, the last time I went to Moscow was in 2014 when I was national team coach, and I really didn't want to go. I kind of went under duress, but it was my job, right? And I said, I'm not spending a cent or a kopeck in this country. I stayed in my hotel the entire time, except when I had to go to the course. I'd seen Red Square. I'd ridden on the subway. The first time I went to Moscow was in 1982. I went there in 83, 84, 85. Missed in 86 because of Chernobyl. I went there 87, 88, 89, and 90. And then I went in 2001 with the Toronto Olympic bid. So the novelty of going to Russia had worn off. And, I'm happy to never go again. But, I just find it interesting that athletes can be used to make political statements, but when athletes speak up, it's often frowned upon. Like, how dare you have an opinion? You're just an athlete. And so that's something that I find kind of interesting. The last thing I want to talk about is the Olympics, and we'll just open it up to questions. And I mentioned to you that athletes are used commercially and without being consulted or without any remuneration for it. Every single athlete who goes to the Olympic Games is being used by the Olympics. Right now, we also get this opportunity of a lifetime to participate. I'm not going to deny that. But think about the revenue, the commercial impact that the Olympics have. Like those Olympic rings are one of the most powerful brands in the world. And the IOC makes money hand over fist because of that. And at the very root of all of it is the young people that go out and participate. And most of them get nothing for it. If you win, you might get some sponsorship if you're lucky. Now, if you're an American athlete and you win in a sport like my sport, canoeing, you don't get anything because all the sponsorship money is going to the track athletes or the dream team. And we didn't do it. I didn't get involved in canoeing for money. I got involved in this because I had a dream to be like John Wood. And I don't regret that, like I live in a very modest house and I drive right now a car that's a 2017, so I don't get a new car every year. Very modest lifestyle. I love my lifestyle. So I'm not dissatisfied at all with it. But there are athletes that they take out mortgages to participate at the Olympics and they get nothing back for it. And the IOC is making money like crazy. So one of the best things I heard was that somebody mentioned before the opening ceremonies in, I guess it was in Barcelona, we're all standing on outside the stadium. We can't see what's going on because we're waiting to come in, but we're all standing there being marshaled, ready to go in. And somebody says, we should go on strike. We should say, we're not marching in until each one of us gets like $20,000. And what would they do? Like it would throw a wrench in the entire show, right? That the whole world is watching. And, I kind of think maybe that would be a neat thing. I'd love to organize something like that. Like I'm not a big labor guy. Let's go on strike. That's not really kind of my thing. But in this instance, I think that would be amazing. During the Toronto Olympic bid for 2008, which we lost to Beijing, I got quite involved in it. I traveled all over the world. I went to Sydney for a month during their Olympics to schmooze with the IOC guys and explain our plan, our venues, and everything to them. I met virtually everybody who was on the IOC at that time. They were all, for the most part, they were all like kind of these slick guys that I wouldn't trust. That was just the impression I had. They were also all guys that, were like super wealthy, the kind of guys where I wonder, like, how'd they get their money? Like it's not all, like they're purported to be these, above reproach guys. Just like FIFA. You want to, the International Football Federation, Soccer Federation. You want to see a documentary, an interesting documentary, watch the documentary about FIFA on Netflix about, how the scandalous process that was that they went through to award the World Cup to Moscow and then to Qatar. And the money that these guys, the bribes they took to do that. The IOC is no different. At least it wasn't then. Maybe it's a little bit better now. Maybe there's some people that, maybe I'm got to be careful when you do this thing that you don't paint everybody with the same brush. I'm sure there's good people. But in general, if you think about it, these are the people that are profiting off international sport. And the athletes get an experience of a lifetime, but that's it. Right. And so maybe that's the cost of an experience of a lifetime is that you basically allow yourself to be used to generate wealth by other people and you get a nice experience. Or maybe we should redistribute the revenue that's generated by these things to get a little bit more, to make it a little bit more fair. They even did that in collegiate sports in the United States now, right? Because they used to be like you couldn't accept a free dinner, without potentially jeopardizing your status to play collegiate sports in the US. And now these athletes can get paid. And that's probably a good thing because collegiate sports in the US generates billions of dollars. So anyway, I'm going to stop here because I kind of touched on a few things with regards to politics and international sport from an athlete's point of view. And again, I'm not the expert, I'm not the academic on this, but I would love to engage in a conversation, generated by questions. Yeah.
In your last subject, you talk about some athletes in some sports in the United States get a ton of money.
Mm-hmm.
And you and this particular one in Canada don't. how did they do it in the United States? I don't think they went on strike, but
No, you know, I think what happens is in the United States is simply this. Their population is roughly 10 times ours. Their economy, I don't know how much bigger their economy is than ours, I think it's more than 10 times bigger than ours. They're the most, commercial, country in the world. Like their marketing, American marketing is like triple what any other country's marketing is. And they also have a lot of really good athletes who do really well in a lot of different sports. And a lot of sports they do well in are collegiate sports because the collegiate system is so strong in sports. So like track, swimming, team sports. Those are the big US sports. And so if you get a guy like who's, the Americans haven't won the 100-meter sprint in a long time, right? Going back to probably Carl Lewis in 1984. But Carl Lewis was like the king, like all over, he was everywhere. He made millions of dollars by being the 100-meter Olympic champion in 1984. Donovan Bailey, who was our Olympic champion in 1996, guy from Oakville, he's done very well for himself. Actually, Donovan was doing very well for himself before he went to the Olympics. He's a smart guy. He's a businessman. But he doesn't generate the type of wealth out of his Olympic and world record performance that an American athlete in 100 meters would. Americans want to latch on to that top athlete, the most marketable athlete, and they'll pour funds at them. They're not getting money from the Olympic Federation or from their National Sport Federation. They're getting money from commercial sponsorship. But the problem is the pool of available sponsors is still smaller than the number of athletes that exist. And the other problem is that if you're, if you and I are running a business and we want an athlete to be the face of our business, we want the best athlete. We want the most popular athlete. We want the highest profile athlete. We don't want the athlete that may have won an Olympic medal, but they're just like we're America. We won 40 Olympic medals. They're a dime a dozen, and gold medals. And we don't want the one that won it in archery. We wanted the one that won it in swimming, like Michael Phelps, right? And so that's how it's happening, is that it's all commercially driven. And in Canada, everything's the same, but it's on a smaller scale, right? Like my buddy Adam did really well, but not to the degree that Donovan did, for example, who was in a more high-profile event. And that's just kind of the way it goes. And I'll go back to like when I first entertained the thought of going to the Olympics as a little kid, dollar signs weren't in my eyes. Like I wasn't thinking about money. I was thinking about, I want to win a gold medal. And that's all I've ever really thought about is the race, is the satisfaction of being the guy that won the race. But at the end of the day, you look around and people are generating wealth off athletes. Right now, the big thing is that the big issue has been most recently the soccer teams, the women's soccer teams, both in Canada and the United States, right? They get a lot less funding or make a lot less money out of being World Cup soccer players than the men's teams do. And, I don't know how you solve that problem, because the men's team plays in front of much bigger crowds. They have a much bigger television audience. They generate a lot more revenue. So how should the women be? The women should be treated equally, like in an ideal world, but the money's got to come from somewhere. So I don't know what the answers are. And I do know that the women, have talked about going on strike. So, but again, I don't know what the answers are, but I can tell you that it's not necessarily fair. And what is infuriating to me is when an athlete has an opportunity to use their platform to share their opinion, they're told to shut up and dribble. I just think that's wrong, right?
Larry, I hate to